Hey there, it's Michelle Caruana from Play Cafe Academy and Profitable Play. And as you can see, I'm taking a little break from setting up for my daughter's first birthday party. We already celebrated her actual birthday, which was on the 17th. We rented out Village Play, which is one of our favorite local play spaces here. It's in East Aurora, New York. So we rented it out for a little private family play date. We ordered a pizza. We just kept it very low key. But tomorrow, our family hasn't seen our new house yet, so we are gonna have a small family party for her. And I've just been running around like crazy setting up, and again, I figured I'd just take a little break. And something that I wanted to talk about today is something I've been meaning to talk about for a long time, and this is one of those videos that you can only really make with hindsight. So when I was actively owning my indoor playground business, I could have never talked about this because this is one of those taboo subjects. And it's one that I want to take on now because, again, I have a lot of hindsight. I have a lot of experience. I've helped a lot of other owners with this. And nobody that is actively owning their business can really talk about this because, again, it's very taboo. And you don't want to open yourself up to making customers nervous or having them lose their trust or faith in your business or anything like that. But the reality is this stuff happens. And not every single time you go through this, and spoiler alert, we're talking about health inspections, not every single inspection is going to go perfectly. So today I want to talk about things that we were marked off for on our health inspections throughout the year. Now, we never quote unquote failed a health inspection. So we were never, asked to close. We were never fined or anything like that. However, there were a couple times where they marked us off on a couple things and they had to come back and check. They just let us know how we could remedy those issues, and then they would come back and check. And these were all completely unexpected. So typically in New York State, I know every single state, every county, in fact, is very different. So in our county, which was Ontario County, the health department would come once every 6 months at a completely unexpected time, unexpected day. And you just had to make sure that everything was in tip-top shape or you would fail. Now, again, we never failed, but we did get marked off on some things, and I wanted to talk about them because a lot of them are really surprising. And if we would have had a combination of these things in a singular health inspection, we might have failed. Luckily, all of these things took part, like I said, over 5 years. So there wasn't a combination of these things. There was really only one, maybe two issues per health inspection, thank goodness. So as always, the point of this channel is to help you avoid the mistakes that I made in my business. And like I said, current owners can't talk about this stuff. So I want to get really candid and I want to talk about some of our quote unquote failures with health inspections. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is our cooler. So if you remember, and I'll share a picture, we used to have an open air cooler, which is what it's called. And customers could reach in, they could choose a drink or a snack. We had different things in it at different times. Sometimes we had sandwiches during busy season, quiche, drinks mainly, but there were things in there that needed to be refrigerated in order to be safe for consumption. So the open air cooler, people would grab something, bring it to the counter, pay for it. Now this cooler, it was state of the art. We paid multiple thousands of dollars for it. It was commercial grade. There was nothing residential about it. And it had a built-in thermometer, a built-in temperature, and it said right on the outside, it would say exactly what the temperature was. However, apparently, at least in Ontario County, that isn't good enough. And they actually wanted us, and this sounds unbelievable, but I swear it's true. They wanted us to have a little cup, or we actually put a mason jar in our cooler with an actual, that was filled with liquid, that had an actual thermometer in it. And they wanted to read that because that would be indicative of what the actual temperature of the liquid was in the cooler. Because I guess with open air coolers, they're really hard to get accurate readings from with those built-in thermometers. So you really need to have an actual thermometer immersed in liquid in order to get an accurate reading. So we were marked off for that. The next day, I think I just hopped on Amazon immediately, purchased a metal liquid thermometer, filled a mason jar with water, and boom, the next time it was acceptable. But that was a big whoops. And it's something that the retailer who sold us the cooler never told us. It's something that never came up in our pre-inspection when we were getting our health department license issued. So just be really careful if you have an open air cooler that doesn't have a door or anything like that. But even with the doors, sometimes they like to, again, double, triple check the temperature, especially if you have things like milk, which we did, or like I said, sandwiches, quiche, they really want to make sure that that temperature is accurate because again, there's a really high failure rate for those built-in thermometers. So that was the first thing. The second thing, and this is something that surprises a lot of people, and that is reusable mugs. So one of our core values at our business was sustainability, and we really cared about the environment and using sustainable materials. So one of the things that we really wanted to do was we wanted to get all of these custom mugs made, these reusable, ceramic mugs, plates, silverware. So we ordered a ton in all of these amazing colors. It fit our aesthetic. And at the beginning, we didn't have a commercial dishwasher. We did have a 3-bay sink, but again, our county was incredibly strict. In a lot of counties, you only need either a commercial dishwasher or a 3-bay sink in order to have reusable dishes, reusable cups, plates, silverware, things like that. But we didn't have the dishwasher yet. We were actually planning to get one, but we purchased one on resale and it just wasn't in yet. It was getting refurbished. The company that we purchased from, called Restaurant Innovations, they were actually, like I said, they were recertifying it. They were providing us with an extended warranty. So even though it was used, we were able to purchase it under warranty, and they did have to service it a couple times. We just didn't have it in yet. But the promise of getting something is not enough. Even if you have a purchase receipt, even if you have a delivery date, unless it's there in your building, it doesn't exist. So we had to purchase all disposable mugs, plates, silverware for the time being. And then honestly, we ended up using mostly disposable, especially coffee cups, because spills were so incredibly frequent with our reusable mugs. But again, just so you know, it might be really attractive to save money with all reusable dishes, silverware, things like that, but you have to have a commercial dishwasher. And the difference between a residential dishwasher and a commercial dishwasher is extreme, both in terms of price, in terms of availability. Our commercial dishwasher for retail, I think it was almost $7,000 to $10,000. I honestly can't remember because again, we bought it sold. We were able to get it for I think between $5,000 and $7,000. That includes the recertification, the extended warranty, a couple months of solution, but it was an extremely expensive dishwasher. The great thing about it is that it did an entire load in like less than 30 seconds. It was incredible. So it was very quick. And we used to wash toys and balls and things like that in it as well. But again, be careful if you want to use reusable stuff. If you don't have the commercial dishwasher and or the 3-bay sink, just make sure you check with your county on which you actually need. Okay, next, and this was completely my bad. This I knew better, but they just caught us at a really off time. So when you have that 3-bay sink, if you're preparing food in any way, even if you're not cooking. So in our case, we were chopping up cheese, we were cutting vegetables, cutting fruit, things like that. That was enough to trigger the need for a vegetable sink. And a vegetable sink basically just means that it's one container of the 3-bay sink, and it was protected against backflow. So, if there was a drainage problem, no backflow would ever go in it. It was basically meant for washing vegetables and things like that. And at this particular day when they came in, my kids were in with me, and this was actually at a time where we really weren't, again, doing much prep other than that cutting of the fruit and vegetables, and they never really touched the sink. The actual vegetable sink is really meant for restaurants who have to put like huge amounts of vegetable in the sink. We just had a little strainer that was propped on the side. So in the vegetable sink, I actually had like some paint supplies that my kids were using earlier that day. I know you're definitely not supposed to do that. And of course they saw it, and they also saw like a little bit of paint on the side. But again, our fruits and vegetables actually never touched the sides of the sink because we were at a pretty low volume that time. I think they came in the summer. We were really only chopping fruits and vegetables maybe once a day, and again, they never touched the sink. So even though everything was completely kosher, everything was above board, no paint ever touched any food or was even in the same area, because again, we had that strainer propped up on the side. We got mega points off for that, and they came back multiple times, and we had to become really, really strict about that vegetable sink. Nothing except for vegetables can ever go in it. You can't hang a rag on the side, nothing like that. So just be really, really careful if you do require a vegetable sink per your health license, that you are extremely strict about it. Make sure all your staff knows which one it is, what can and cannot go in it, because that is there are different levels of offenses when it comes to the health department. And that was a big one. That was probably the biggest one that we had. All right, the next was our dishwasher liquid. So with that commercial dishwasher that I was talking about, it had 2 tubes coming out of the back, and you really had to like move the entire dishwasher and check the levels every once in a while. And before we really had our systems down and we had our, mid-shift task list, our deep cleaning task list, before we had all of that in place and we had really optimized our day-to-day, especially with our manager, we were just kind of checking the liquid as we thought of it. And that was because we really only had to change the liquid every couple months. So it wasn't always top of mind because this dishwasher liquid was a concentrate. So again, we used a very little amount. And one time the health department came, they pulled out the dishwasher to check the levels, and the levels were below what was acceptable. So even though there was still dishwasher liquid in the tubs, it wasn't high enough and we didn't have any extra on hand. So again, that's the thing. Even if you have it on automatic reorder, even if you have proof that you've ordered more, unless it's in your facility at the time of inspection, it doesn't exist. So we had to make sure after that we always had extra detergent, extra sanitizing solution on hand so that, if we ever had a really busy day and we ended up running out, we automatically could just swap the empty ones out with new ones. So that was another big one. And commercial dishwashing liquid, especially the sanitizing solution, is very expensive. So make sure you're budgeting that. If you are looking at commercial dishwashers, make sure you're looking up what the solution costs, different vendors, make sure you price compare, because again, that can get very expensive and it's something that is really big. So it's hard to keep inventory of. And I advocate a lot for off-site storage units when needed, but this is one of those things that you have to have on your premises. So make sure you build an extra space for that. We had a rack over our dishwasher where we always kept extra solution after that, but just make sure you're really careful that you always have extra on hand. Same with hand sanitizer, same with hand wash liquid hand soap near your hand washing sink. A lot of you will need multiple hand washing sinks for employees at different stations. If it's anywhere near low and you don't have extra on hand, you will absolutely get docked for it. Okay, the next thing that we got docked for, and this was another big one, was our coffee milk times. I'm just reading off my notes and that's what I wrote. So basically what this one was is they came in, we had those metal carafes of like milk, 2% creamer, almond milk, soy milk, whatever. And even though they actually opened them up, they took the temperature, even though the temperature was in the desirable range, so that was completely fine. If that milk was not in the desirable range, that would have been in our county a failure and we would have had to either pay a fine or close. I'm not exactly sure what the exact consequences are, but that would have been a big major uh-oh. So thank goodness that we were really on top of it. And the actual temperatures of the liquid was just fine. It wasn't going to make anybody sick or anything. However, we didn't have the time that those carafes were removed from the fridge written on the side of the coffee. So if you ever go to a coffee shop or if you go to Starbucks and you see, soy milk or any sort of milk dairy product out and it says like 12:48, that's what time they removed it. And you have to know how long you can keep them out. And it depends on what material your carafe is. Again, ours were super insulated metal. I think they were like double walled. So we were able to keep them out for around 3 to 5 hours. I can't remember exactly what it was because again, this was years ago. But your health department will tell you exactly how long your milk, depending on your containers, can be out. And you have to write, at least in our county, the times both on the milk and on the coffee. Now, we did have the times written on the coffee pot labels, so that was good. We just didn't even realize. We knew what the temperature needed to be for the milk. We knew how long it could be left out, but we didn't know that we actually had to physically write the time on the carafes, and that was something that we got docked for. The next thing, and this is, again, really silly. So we didn't have room in our facility for a washer and dryer. And we relied on Cintas to wash and sanitize all of our rags. So rags that we wiped the counters off with, the tables, we had them soaked in like bleach solution to sanitize the tables, sanitize surfaces, the prep tables, things like that. But once in a while, like Cintas either just wouldn't come. We were one of their smaller customers. We had some issues with them. So sometimes they wouldn't come, or we would have a super busy day and they wouldn't be able to like make an extra stop or anything like that. So there were a couple of times where I had to bring the rags home, wash them, and bring them back. And that is apparently a big no-no. I don't really understand the logistics, what is different about my home washer and dryer versus a washer and dryer at the facility. You don't need a commercial washer and dryer, at least in our county, to wash the rags, but they had a big problem with me bringing the rags home. I think it's like chain of custody, kind of, if you are like a true crime person like me. I think they didn't like that I was taking them home. They were in my car for an indeterminate amount of time. I mean, I was taking them home and bringing them right back, to be honest. But they had a real problem with the fact that they were, in undisclosed locations. They don't know what my living conditions are like. I think that was the big thing. Like, they wanted to be able to inspect the washer and dryer that was actually washing the rags. It needed to have a sanitizing cycle, which luckily mine did. We had just moved into a home, so we had brand new appliances, but they needed to see them and they needed to be able to inspect them. So if you don't have a washer and dryer on site, if you have room for one, do it, because we also washed our costumes. We washed a lot of textiles, a lot of reusable party supplies in those washer and dryers, and that was fine. That was fine with the health department, but the rags that were being used to sanitize things, I was not allowed to take them home and wash them. I did not know that, because again, I read through our health code really with a high level of detail, and it never said that you needed a commercial machine, and it didn't specify that it had to be on site. But again, the health department has a lot of discretion, and so even if something is not clearly written in the code, they have, it really depends on the inspector that you get, whether they mark you off on things, whether they fine you even. So there's a lot of gray area in the health code. So just know that, be prepared for it. Always have extra room in your budget in case you need to buy, an extra thermometer, or in case you need to, have your rag vendor, for us it was Cintas, make an extra stop so that you really never ran out of rags, because that's what happened to us. I was only doing it in emergencies, but it happens. All right, lastly, and this was another my bad. We had an office refrigerator, and it was mainly for staff lunches and things like that, but we did occasionally store party catering in there. So for example, like veggie trays, things like that, and they were taped shut. Like, we didn't have, things randomly open air without lids or anything in there. But at the time, I had just had my son via C-section. It was very traumatic. I was going through a really tough recovery, and I was pumping a lot at work. And I had breast milk stored in that employee fridge. I didn't have it in the main fridge, but I had it in our employee fridge. But because there was like a catering item in there with the breast milk in like the containers, they did not like that. And same thing, I had employees that were also nursing mothers, and up until that point, I was also allowing them to pump during work. I was allowing people to pump during birthday parties and store milk, again, in the employee refrigerator. So moving forward, we just had to make sure that all catering things were always in the main fridge, where none of the employee lunches, takeout, anything like that was ever stored. So again, a lot of these issues can be solved if you have additional space, if you have, top of line appliances, if you have the room for all of this stuff, or if you live in a county that is a little bit more lax than ours. But again, these were all things that we quote unquote failed on our health inspection. No fines, no shutdowns ever, but we did have to address them, and they did come back a couple months later to double check. And that was pretty much it. That's everything I wrote down. But if you have any questions about any of these, or if you have questions about your specific health code, I would definitely recommend reaching out to your local health department. There usually is one person that is, depending on how big your area is, there's usually one person designed to a very specific geographic area. So we had one person that was assigned to like a 1 mile strip of road. There was like 20 or so restaurants on that road, and he was responsible for just those 20 restaurants. And I did my best to make friends with him. I did my best to, have a good relationship, so that if I ever had a question, like if I was adding a new menu item, or if I was changing up our milk alternatives, or if I was, wanting to understand more about food allergies, or if we were changing vendors, or if I was purchasing a new appliance, I tried to establish a great relationship with him so that I was able to contact him, and he was, happy to get my calls. He was, very open and honest with answering questions, telling me what was and wasn't okay. And it ended up really working out. Again, we were never fined for anything, and we had a great relationship. It's really hit or miss depending on your area, depending on who you get, but do your best to, again, have a good relationship because they can be extremely invaluable, especially in our area. I believe this has changed since COVID, but in our area, the health department was also responsible for things like your music licenses, which was kind of odd. So if we were playing music that wasn't commercially licensed, they were in charge of monitoring that and seeing if you needed to be fined for that or not, if you were playing non-commercially licensed music. Again, I think that jurisdiction has changed, but they were also responsible for limiting or accepting our drop-off hours. So they were in charge of our summer camp drop-off program, telling us if we did need a daycare certification, if we didn't. They were in charge of a lot of our temporary liquor licenses. For some of our events, we used to do temporary liquor licenses, and we used to have to fill out these forms and have our landlord sign it and then send it back in. He was really in charge of not just whether or not those things got approved, but also how quickly they got approved. So if we decided to do some like event with a local brewery and we wanted to pour beer and wine or something and we needed that temporary permit to go through, he was in charge of whether or not we met that deadline, or whether or not, he greased the wheels so it could go through and it could get the signatures that it needed, or whether he could just kind of stop it in its tracks. So the health department is often, depending on your area, responsible for a lot more than you even think. So again, it's always good to have a great relationship with people that you work with, but for your local health inspector, it's even more important, and it can truly make or break your business. So again, I love these types of videos that I can create without fear of, customer backlash or anything. So if you have any other questions about the nitty gritty, the good, bad, ugly of owning an indoor playground, please let me know. This is one of my favorite types of videos to do. You can ask me anything. Again, just put it in the comments. I would love to hear your ideas for future videos, but I hope you have a great weekend. Let's pray that the weather holds out for my daughter's birthday tomorrow, and I will see you soon. All right, bye for now.